Donald Trump lo hizo otra vez. En una entrevista con Joe Rogan que rápidamente se volvió viral, el expresidente lanzó una declaración que dejó a todos boquiabiertos. This time it was not about the economy or its eternal dispute with the media. It was something much more impactful. He spoke of the Middle East, but not from the political approach to which we are accustomed. He mentioned nothing more and nothing less than the biblical prophecies related to the end of the world. This left many wondering, what did he mean exactly? How does all of this connect with the Bible and current events? If you thought you had already heard it all, get ready, because what we will reveal here could change your perspective. In this video, we will not only debunk Trump's statements, but also the impact they have on the prophetic vision of the Middle East. We will see how the changes in the region, the biblical references, and the preparations for the Third Temple in Jerusalem could be marking crucial signs for the future. Let's begin. Donald Trump's words were the Middle East is changing rapidly. You know that there are prophets who say that the world will come to an end in this region. The Middle East has always been at the center of world events, but according to Donald Trump and many biblical references, his importance goes far beyond politics. In his interview with Joe Rogan, Trump highlighted how this region is experiencing rapid changes that, according to him, could be aligned with events prophesied thousands of years ago. The Bible repeatedly mentions the Middle East as the scenario of crucial moments in the history of humanity. From the prophets of the Old Testament, such as Ezekiel, Daniel, and Zechariah, to the visions of the Apocalypse of John, this region occupies a special place in the narrative of the end of times. Even Jesus spoke of Jerusalem as a key point in the last days, warning his disciples to observe the events there as signs of the times. Trump subrayó que los activos. 2. According to the texts, this would include conflicts, unexpected alliances, and the resurgence of a global interest for Jerusalem. For many believers, these statements are not only interesting, they are a clear sign that the events in the Middle East have a meaning that transcends politics. But how does all this fit with the prophecies of the Temple and the Great Tribulation? To understand it, we have to remember that Jerusalem is much more than a historical city. It is a spiritual and prophetic symbol of great importance. In the Bible, its relevance goes beyond ancient accounts. It is directly linked to the key events of the end of times. In his interview, Donald Trump underlined that Jerusalem and its temple are central pieces in biblical prophecies. But what makes the temple so crucial, and how does it connect with the current events? The history of the temple in Jerusalem begins with the Temple of Solomon, built approximately in the year 957 BC. It was a sacred place where the sacrifices were made according to the instructions of the Mosaic Law. However, it was also a place of worship. Thus, the prophecy of Jesus about his destruction is fulfilled. Since then, there has been no temple in Jerusalem, but the Bible predicts that there will be a third temple that will play a central role in the events of the end times. This idea is not just a long-cherished desire among many Jews. Daniel 9:27 says he will confirm a pact with many for a week. In the middle of the week, he will cease the sacrifice and the offering. And on the wing of the temple, he will place the desolating abomination until the destruction decreed on the devastator is fulfilled. This verse speaks of a leader, a moment that will move the world, and is known as the desolating abomination. Third, Matthew 24:15-21, it says, "So, when you see in the holy place the desolating abomination of which the prophet Daniel spoke, then those who are in Judea will be saved." In this verse, Jesus warns his followers that when they see the desolate abomination in the temple, they will not flee to the mountains, because then there will be great tribulation, as there has not been since the beginning of the world until now, nor will there be. The Institute of the Temple has worked for decades to recreate the utensils and rituals necessary for the temple. Among its achievements are the manufacture of exact replicas of the utensils used in the original temple, such as the golden candelabrum, the incense altar, and the priestly robes. The identification of people who meet the genealogical requirements of the temple to serve as priests in the temple, the training of these priests in the sacrifices and rituals described in the Mosaic Law. In addition, this institute has worked on the breeding of a red cow, an essential element for the temple purification rituals. According to the Jewish tradition, each of these steps points to an intentioned preparation for the fulfillment of the prophecies. But then, what is the role of Donald Trump? During his presidency, Donald Trump made decisions that many considered full of prophetic significance. One of the most notable was the transfer of the United States Embassy to Jerusalem. Reconociendo oficialmente a la ciudad como la capital de Israel, Este acto fue visto por algunos como un paso hacia el cumplimiento de las profecías relacionadas con el templo y Jerusalén. Trump también mencionó los acuerdos de Abraham, que buscaron establecer la paz entre Israel y Jerusalén. I'm going to say another word. For many, current developments are not mere coincidences. The combination of tangible preparations for the Third Temple, along with recent political movements, reinforces the belief that the pieces of this prophetic puzzle are aligning. However, not everyone shares this perspective. There are those who argue that these events are merely symbolic or political, and do not necessarily indicate a literal fulfillment of prophecies. Whatever the interpretation, what is clear is that the temple in Jerusalem is still a point of world interest. That is why we need to know how these events are connected to the concept of the Great Tribulation, and why this period is described as one of the most intense in the history of humanity. The Great Tribulation is one of the most dramatic and terrifying concepts in biblical prophecies. The Great Tribulation is one of the most dramatic and terrifying concepts in biblical prophecies. Jesus, the prophets, and the apostles. They spoke extensively about this period, describing it as a time of unprecedented chaos and persecution. According to the biblical narrative, this stage is directly linked to the events in the temple and the emergence of the Antichrist. In biblical terms, the Great Tribulation refers to a period of 7 years, divided into 2 halves. The first half will be marked by an apparent period of peace, headed by a world leader who, according to the prophecies, will sign a pact with Israel. This act will be a sign for the believers to be alert, as it will mark the beginning of the 3.5 final years, a period of persecution and calamities described in Revelation 6:19. During the Great Tribulation, the world will experience a series of divine judgments, known as the seals, trumpets, and cups of Revelation. These include natural catastrophes, earthquakes, plagues, and cosmic phenomena that will alter life on Earth, international conflicts, nations facing each other on an unprecedented scale, religious persecution. Believers will be persecuted for their faith, while the Antichrist and his global system seek to eradicate all resistance. These events not only highlight the magnitude of suffering, but also the resistance of those who will remain faithful during these difficult times. Jesus is one of them. Not only did he predict these events, but he also emphasized the importance of being spiritually prepared. Matthew 24:42-44 says, "Therefore, stay awake, because you don't know what day your Lord will come." But understand this, if the owner of the house knew what time of night the thief comes, he would be alert and would not let his house be stolen. So you must also be prepared, because the Son of Man will come at the least thought-out time. Here Jesus urged his followers to remain alert because the exact moment of these events is unknown. This urgency is not only for those in the Middle East, but for all those who seek to understand the times in which we live. During his interview, Donald Trump emphasized how the developments in the Middle East, especially around Jerusalem, podrían estar eventos. Aunque no afirmó explícitamente que estamos entrando en la gran tribulación, sus declaraciones left space to reflect on the connection between biblical prophecies and current political realities. Although the Great Tribulation is described as a period of extreme suffering, it is also a time that points to an outcome full of hope. The Bible promises that, at the end of these events, Jesus will return, establishing a kingdom of peace and justice. This message of hope is fundamental for those who see the prophecies not only as warnings, but as a reminder of the redemption that is coming. In conclusion, the recent events in the Middle East, the statements of Donald Trump, and the global changes have generated intense debates about whether we are seeing a literal fulfillment of biblical prophecies, or whether we are simply going through a series of historical coincidences. Regardless of the perspective we take, what is clear is that we are living in times that invite reflection. Throughout this video, we have explored how the elements described in the Bible seem to be taking shape in the current events. The temple in Jerusalem, the preparations are moving forward, and the idea of a third temple is more present than ever. Changes in the Middle East. Strategic alliances such as the Abraham Accords and political movements in the region are aligned with biblical narratives about pacts and conflicts. The leadership of Donald Trump. Their decisions have put Jerusalem and the Middle East at the center of attention, reinforcing the connection with ancient prophecies. Of course, not everyone is convinced that these events have a spiritual meaning. The skeptics argue that biblical prophecies are vague and open to interpretation, which allows almost any event to fit into its framework. But for others, the alignment of these signs is too precise to ignore. The question that remains for you is ¿qué opinas de todo esto? ¿Crees que estamos presenciando señales del fin de los tiempos? ¿O estos eventos tienen explicaciones más terrenales? We would love to read your thoughts in the comments. If something is taught to us by the prophecies in the scriptures, it is that each action has consequences, and each generation has the opportunity to prepare for the future. Do you think we are living in a time of spiritual transformation, or do we simply see how the cycles of human history develop? If this video has made you think,